Welcome back to another episode of the Cameras and Coffee podcast. I am sitting here with Sandra Henderson, and we're going to talk about how to grow your business by streamlining. And this is something I know is very important. So welcome. I am so excited you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. And yes, I am all about systems, workflow, streamlining your business so that you can take some work off your plate and continue thriving. So I am super, super excited for our chat today.
Honestly, that's the only thing that keeps me from going crazy. I'm like, this is the time of year I revamp everything. When this airs, it'll probably be in the thick of everyone's photography season, but we're recording this in March. And so these are the times where I'm going through my workflows, making sure they're set so that I am golden when it comes time to busy season. But yeah, I can't wait to dive into this topic for someone that you might be struggling as far as organization, or if you're struggling with what to know what you should be doing. Let's say you're starting out. This is going to be a great topic for you today. She's got so much good information, great nuggets of information. So we're going to dive into that and pretend we haven't talked for the last 5 minutes before hitting record.
It's always the fun part about a podcast interview.
Yes. So she is on vacation mode because it is spring break for her coming up in a couple days. So, and I have one, I'm kind of going crazy because I'm getting ready for a week from now. So kind of all the fun things. But before we dive in, Sandra, are you a coffee drinker? What is your beverage of choice?
It's funny. I was actually really excited to answer this question because I am not a coffee drinker. I have never had a cup of coffee. And when I tell people that, they look at me like I have 8 heads. I've never had a cup of coffee. I'm super sensitive to caffeine. So I actually went completely caffeine free in 2015. So it's been,
That's
almost
awesome.
9 years. And so if I'm going to meet anybody for coffee or tea or anything like that, I usually bring decaf tea with me. Because most people, they're like, decaf? What's that? I've never heard of that before. But my go-to warm beverage of choice is definitely a hot chocolate. But my secret to it is I get my whipped cream on the side because whipped cream is my favorite thing. And so I like to eat it with a spoon and then drink my hot chocolate.
Oh, I love that. There are so many things like that I love, but I have a dairy intolerance. So it's I can't, I really shouldn't have it. And so anyone who has a dairy intolerance, we all know, we still do it half the time.
Sometimes it's worth the risk.
but yeah, it's definitely, that's where I cut out creamer because I was that's how I would always take my coffee, but now I take it black. And so that's when I'm okay, I can do this. But if you've never had caffeine, that's really good. Or not have caffeine, never had coffee.
Yeah, I used to drink
caffeine,
a lot.
That's really good.
I used to drink a lot of caffeinated pop, but I realized that every time I say pop when I'm on an American podcast, I remember that most of you guys call it soda.
Soda.
Yeah.
Where are you coming from? Because I'm in Michigan, so we call it pop.
Okay, yeah. I'm really just I am about 2 hours away from Detroit. I'm very, very close to the Michigan border. I do a fantastic Michigan accent.
You'll have to just throw it in there somewhere.
Right?
I love it.
It's so true. But yeah, so I used to drink a lot of caffeinated pop and I realized it was contributing to my anxiety so much. So I had to go completely caffeine free, and it's crazy the difference that it makes for me. And there are definitely days that I'm like, man, I wish I drank coffee. I need a boost right now. But thankfully, that's few and far between.
Yeah, for real. There's a lot of other things that are probably healthier in that way. So that's good. That just means you have a healthier lifestyle in that sense, where you don't have a caffeine addiction like a lot of us do trying to get through this industry.
It does take me a long time to wake up, though. I enjoy my quiet mornings, and my husband, he leaves for work, and if I'm awake, he knows don't say hi to me. I'll text you in an hour. I love you. It's nothing against you, but I just it takes me just that much longer to wake up because I haven't had a cup of coffee.
I love it. That's so great. Well, kind of tell us a little bit about you. There are some special things that make you unique. And I love this. That kind of sets the tone for what we're talking about. And I love this. Um, so I really want to talk about, I love how like people in the industry are sharing what they've overcome to be a professional. And I think yours is an amazing story as far as like what kinds of things you're setting in place to help yourself be successful. So can you kind of share a little bit like where you're coming from, where you are now, the things that you, and don't worry about time. Like go ahead and tell us where you want to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my photography business in 2013, focusing on weddings and families primarily. I used to do a lot of work with newborns and birth photography and things like that. But as most photographers do, the longer in you're in the industry, you kind of niche down a little bit. I wasn't niching down because I was listening to everybody saying you have to niche down. It wasn't my
Mm,
goal to like exclusively be a wedding photographer, but it was more so just creating boundaries for myself in life and making
mm,
sure that I wasn't overworking myself. I
yeah.
had burned myself out probably a good 3 or 4 years in a row to the point that I almost
Mm,
considered shutting down my business in 2019. My husband called me one day because I was crying on the couch. It was actually right around this year. Mid-March was always a bit of
mm.
a like a shake up for me because like you were saying before, like it's the time that we kind of dive into the deep end of the back end of our businesses and make sure that everything is
Oh,
running the way we want it to for busy season. And so I was kind of
well, and
like,
you're looking at taxes and stuff like, am I going to make money this year?
right?
Like, is this worth it? Is
Exactly.
this all worth it? Yes.
Exactly. And so I was sitting on my couch just thinking to myself, like, this isn't why I got into business. I'm not happy.
Mm,
My clients aren't happy. I have to do something to change things up, or I'm gonna have to close down my business. And so my
mm.
husband, love him so much, he talked me off the ledge. I'm still in business now, 5 years later. So thankfully, I found a way to turn it around, and that was by really
Mm,
leaning into systems. And so in 2019, I started to kind of dip my toe into the water of systems and streamlining and seeing what was capable or what was possible
yeah.
of being done. And then in 2020, right around the same time that we all started getting lockdowns because of the pandemic, I also had my health take a really, really sharp turn. At the end
Mm,
of 2019, I was diagnosed with endometriosis, and throughout 2020,
mm,
it just got really, really difficult. I think the stress of the pandemic contributed from me not being able to heal from the surgery that I'd had and all these other
mm.
things. And so I started having a hard time walking around my house. I couldn't eat proper
Wow.
meals. I was losing, I think I lost about 40 pounds over 3 months. And it was really, really rough. And it was another one of those moments where I had to kind of sit back and think, like, I'm not able to work right now because the government says so. And there is
Yeah.
a global health pandemic happening. There is so much happening with my health. Like all these things were being taken away from me that I had no control over. And I decided again, like late one night through a bucket of tears, that my business wasn't going to go on that list. And I was not going
Mm,
to have my business be one more thing that was taken away from me. And so that was
mm.
kind of like the real turning point for me in streamlining and leaning into systems, creating workflows that were going to work for me and my needs and my business. And I stopped worrying about what everybody else was doing. Like everybody else is booking out 52 weddings a year, and that's amazing for them. Props to them.
Yep.
But I just can't do that. And so I had to just really like get honest with myself and kind of figure out what my boundaries were going to be and what I needed to do to be able to continue thriving and making my clients happy at the same time. And so systems was
Yeah.
definitely like the secret ingredient to making that happen.
Oh, that's so true. And I think a lot of times when I get overwhelmed like that, I'm like, I just want to quit everything, and like then bring things back as I see fit. But good for you to like just say, like, this is something I'm not going to give up because it's so easy to do that. And to hold on to something you've built is extremely difficult sometimes when you're really struggling, even like mentally too, when it comes to all those things for sure. Um, yeah, so we're going to kind of go into like the nitty gritty of today's episode, and that kind of brings forward a lot of the things about why you put these in place and and all that. So I think it's just good for listeners to hear that a little bit, and kind of know, like, I feel like that brings on a level. I know there's a lot of people out there that are struggling with things personally in their businesses and wondering, like, can I sustain this? Do I need to quit? Do I need to go find a 9 to 5 now? This was my full-time job. And hopefully listening to this, they'll kind of know a couple of things they can do to try before they like throw in the towel, so to speak. So I'd love to chat about one thing that you have put in your daily workflows in the last year that has been a game changer.
Oh, one thing I've done over the last year, I'm a HoneyBook user. I think every business owner needs to have a CRM that they are using to just manage their client files, contracts, invoices, all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's HoneyBook. And one thing that I started using over the last year is a feature that they have called lead forms. And lead forms let you create an all-in-one booklet, essentially, that will allow potential clients to self-guide themselves through the booking process. And so I really started leaning into this for my mini sessions that I do throughout the year, where my potential clients, they get a link. I can link it through my website. And so they get onto my website, they get this link, they can look and see what times are available on the certain dates. They get all the information about what's included in their package. They're able to make their payment to reserve their booking. And then it automatically sends out a contract to them for them to sign. And once I countersign it, it automatically sends out a confirmation. And so all of a sudden, I'm able to book these mini sessions essentially in my sleep. And I hate to say that we're making money in our sleep, but that's what the possibility is with something like this, because your clients have the ability to then do it on their time. And so it's still within my boundaries, and that they're not, booking all willy-nilly on whatever date and time they want. Like, I've set those preset times and dates. And then when they have the time in their calendar, they can pop onto my website, they can go through the booking process themselves, and it's completely hands off for me. And so finding ways that you're able to really continue to show up and serve your clients, but not have to be at your computer in the meantime is like the secret for sure when you're putting together those systems.
Well, and when you say like making money in your sleep, I think that is like the client side of things thinking that way. But honestly, like, I think what it really is you're elevating the client experience because you're putting it in their hands and making it so they're not waiting, because like society now wants to do things like so quickly. And if you have to send them like an email and like discuss things back and forth, all the questions, and then talk about your ability back and forth and stuff, that's just a waste of their time and your time. It's so much easier to be like, here's the date, here's the time slot, here's like everything you need to know. Do you agree with that? Okay, put your retainer down and then sign your contract. You're all set. And then like other leading information, like honestly, unless you like want to touch base, you don't even really have to go back and forth until you meet them on the day of that mini session. But also I think clients think that, but it's like there's more to just that booking and more than just that mini session that goes into that. And I think a lot of times I've had photographer friends that say clients are like, wow, you made a good chunk of change today. And it's like, okay, but it's not just today. Like I'm going home and I'm going to be editing these for like days. And I think for me, like in order to, because people think like, oh, photographers make this much per session. But honestly, like when you think about the workload you can take on, and I'm kind of going on a soapbox here, but the amount of work you can take on, and like for the sake of your mental health, having like a personal life, things like that, like it's more than just that time that you're shooting and you're editing and all that stuff. But even then, like how much are you really taking home in the end? Because a lot of, depending on how you're growing and things like that, like the goal is to be able to charge like this much, like a higher level. But until you can get to that point, like how do you make a living, because there's so many things that come out of that. But I know for me personally, when it comes back to things that have definitely been a game changer is like I started doing AI editing. So I started using Imagen, and that has been huge for me, especially for
Right?
weddings,
Yeah.
because like, I mean, let's admit, all of us aren't good at keeping things like in camera level, right? Like I just need something to like adjust, crop. The
Mhm.
cropping tool, like sometimes I'm going back and forth. I'm still training it a little bit with the cropping tool because sometimes I'm like, no, I would crop that in a little bit more. Um, but it just takes like the questioning of like, is this the right lighting? Like, is this how bright I'd make it? Is this how dark I'd make it? It just takes a lot of that out for me. And then I can go through and perfect it for my clients and spend a little bit more time on the things I love, like blogging and um, giving them an amazing experience by like talking to them personally, because I'm a very much a like connection based business. But that's not to say I don't have workflows, because I have a ton of workflows. I just, because of that, I'm able to connect with them way differently by like being more personal and like letting all that be the business side of things. So I'm sure you agree with that. Like there's a lot in there that it kind of like takes, because nobody wants to like when you get to a session talk about the money side of things, right? So like when you're doing all that, it's nice to be able to keep that all through email, all through like a system, and then when you're in person you can be way more relational, um,
Yeah,
which I
absolutely. And
think is
it
huge.
for sure. And it gives people just a touch point to refer back to. I
Yeah.
know, like, I book my family session every year, and by the time the session actually rolls around, I have absolutely no idea what I owe for that session.
Right.
So, like, just having that information in
Yes.
writing is really helpful so that clients can refer back to it at any point. And I think just kind of like we were saying about um, how clients think we're booking in our sleep,
Yeah.
but we do a lot of work in the back end, like to get those lead forms up and running took me a couple of days
Mhm.
to get everything, like all the workflows ready to go. So there definitely is some legwork that has to be put in the beginning,
Yeah,
but it just allows, I think my favorite part about it is that it allows our clients, it kind of tells them that we respect their time as much as we respect our
for
own
sure.
time. I booked a hair appointment recently to go and get my hair done, and I was looking for a new salon because the hairstylist I'd been working with previously was on maternity leave,
Mm,
and I had a few options that I was looking at that had come from referrals and recommendations, great reviews online, and I ended up making my decision based on the company that had online booking available. And
mm,
that's because it was 11:30 at night when I was trying to book my
yeah.
appointment. I had been
Mhm.
meaning to book an appointment for days, but I get busy during the day and I
Yeah.
forget. And so when I'm, in bed watching TV at night, and then I remember all of a sudden, oh yeah, I wanted to book a hair appointment. It was so
Mhm.
nice to be able to just do that on my time and not have to worry about setting a
Yeah.
reminder and calling during their business hours and speaking to someone. And I hate talking on the phone. So anytime I can avoid doing that, I will. And so, yeah, I think there are a lot of benefits. And I know a lot of people are
Mhm.
worried about, losing that personal connection when you're allowing these online bookings and things like that. But there are ways around that. You can use, like when you're sending emails, Honeybook and other CRM platforms have smart fields, so it'll auto populate things like the client's
Mhm.
name, their project date, and things like that. So there's all these ways to still personalize the experience you're giving your clients while still using templates and automations and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. And when we start talking about the inquiry section of this, I definitely have a suggestion that if you have time to do is something that you can personalize, which is really nice if it's possible. But I totally agree, because a lot of my like clients, like wedding specific, like I get a lot of those inquiries while I'm sleeping. It's like, they're
Hmm.
scrolling their phone at night looking because that's the downtime they have. Or it's like my senior sessions, like parents are finally home and they're like, oh, okay, I'm going to finally do this. Like I remembered, now I'm going to do this and like go in. So I wake up and I'm like, oh, I have all these things, and then like check it. I'm always like worried that my workflows aren't working. So I'm always like going in, I'm like, no, they're fine. Like, why are you so worried about this?
It's so true. It's
Because I'm
hard to
like,
just let go of that.
yeah, well, and a part of me is like, do I really not have to do anything here? Because I mean, in my busy season, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to like even focus on that. But in the slower seasons, I'm like, oh, like I guess I don't have to do anything, which is kind of funny. But let's kind of talk about like the inquiry process and like what sets someone apart from their competitor. Because I want to kind of dive into that a little bit, because sometimes people don't realize some of the things that could really draw clients in. So let's kind of talk about that.
Yeah, I think the inquiry process is one area that people that I've worked with anyways. I work with photographers building out their systems and workflows and things like that, as well as doing photography. And one thing that I see a lot is that people don't have any sort of automations or workflows for their inquiry
Mm-hmm.
process. And their reason being is that they want it to be really personal. They are always watching their inbox for those new inquiries. They want to reply right away. They want to answer any questions and just be very hands-on in that
Mm-hmm.
experience. But there was a recent study done, I think it was in 2023, that Visa did this study where it showed that 86% of people are hiring someone based on the first business to respond. So that has nothing to
Mm-hmm.
do with the pricing, that has nothing to do with the quality of photos that you're taking or anything like
Yep.
that. It's specifically because you were the first person to respond to their email. And
Yes.
so in order to do that, if you're not using any sort of workflows and automations, you have to be in your inbox. There's no way around
Mm-hmm.
that. And so by using something like an autoresponder, which I know everybody, like our idea, I shouldn't say everybody, but for most people, our idea of an autoresponder is something very stiff, boring, corporate,
Mm-hmm.
just letting them know that we're out of the office. But it's actually a really great opportunity to be able to send information that a potential client could be looking for, start
Yeah,
answering questions before they're asked, let them know when they can expect to hear from you, and start setting your boundaries right from the beginning. Like there's so many ways that you
for
can
sure.
customize it and tailor it so that you are the first person that's landing in their inbox with the information that they're looking for, but you could still be off at a session or sleeping or taking a vacation or whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
And so I think that that is super important for photographers to lean into. And it's a workflow that only has a few steps. So if you are new to the workflow, like setting workflows up, or if you are busy and you just don't think you're going to have the time, it my inquiry workflow is only about 6 steps. And so it's not one that is going to take you forever to set up, and is one that I think is going to, what's the way I want to phrase this? It's going to be the one that kind of like makes
guides
you the
maybe.
most excited about
Oh
workflows. You're
yeah.
going to start to see the possibilities and like, oh, this
Mm-hmm.
person got their information and now they want to book a consultation and I have been at a session and all of this happened without me. And it gets the
Yeah.
wheels turning. And once you start streamlining and automating things, it is a little bit addictive. It's like, oh, this wasn't so scary. This wasn't so bad.
Yes.
What else can I do? So yeah, I think that starting with
It's
an
so
inquiry
true.
process is definitely like one that I recommend all photographers, all business owners look
Yeah.
at. If you already have one, see if you can fine tune it, and make sure that you're the one that's landing in the potential client's inbox first.
No, I totally agree. And when you say it's addictive, I'm like, yes, because I use it in a lot of ways.
Right?
Well, and there's two things I want to mention. Like one, it's like um just again, like how society is, we need constant reminders for things. And so when you can add things in, like checking in with that person, like, hey, I sent you all this information, like just wanted to check in and make sure things are good. There's automations for that that can trigger or not trigger based on their responses. But another thing is if you want to make that system more personal, there's a lot of times you can like do a video recording and add it into that video so they can get to know you a little bit, um to kind of know like, oh, this is her, this is how she talks, she seems relatable, or he, and kind of like add that little personal touch in there. I know some people they'll record it and put it in there per person, but that doesn't always have to be the case. You can always just record something based on what you tell a lot of people, and just make it personal that way, just humanize it a little bit. So yeah, I always think that's like a really cool option. But when you say it gets addicting, it definitely does.
Yeah,
I have so
absolutely.
many workflows.
And when you're
Oh,
creating these workflows, you need to make templates that go along with them. And
mm,
so when you're creating these videos, it takes less time to just add that video to a template that you already have written, as opposed to
mm-hmm.
having to write out the whole email and record this
Yeah.
video. And I actually recently math is not my strong suit, so this is very rough math. But if you were to send 20 emails a day and you saved yourself a minute from every single email because you are using a template and just adding a few notes in, that equals 20 minutes a day. Not a huge deal. Like 20 minutes, we can, watch half an episode of TV or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
But that 20 minutes a day actually adds up to over 6.5 hours a month that you are
Mm,
either wasting or saving yourself. And so it really adds up. And when you think like I'm wasting 6.5 hours a month just by typing up an email for an extra minute, think about all the other ways that you can start saving yourself time by streamlining and using templates and
mm-hmm.
taking a second to pull up a template and then 30 seconds to add a video to it, as opposed to
Yeah,
the 5 minutes for writing the email and then 5 minutes to record a personal video and then uploading and
for sure.
attaching. And all of a sudden, one email has taken you 20 minutes. And so, yeah, just kind of like finding ways to still be able to show up and deliver that service that you want to give. It's entirely possible when you're using templates and just making sure that you're navigating the way that they're being sent and things like that. Like some platforms will allow emails to automatically be sent. Some of them have an option where it will pull up the template for you and then send you a notification. So you're the one that has to send it yourself. There's all kinds of ways that you can really personalize it to your needs, which I think is really the key for successful systems. It's important to show up for your clients, but you have to show up for your clients within your own boundaries and your own needs, or you're
Yeah.
never going to be able to keep up with it.
Well, even like like simple like autoresponder too that talks about like when your office hours are or when you're available. Like that's just setting the expectation right off the bat when someone inquires with you, so they know like this is how they prefer to be contacted. Um, but going back to like saving that time, I had Dana Cadwell on the podcast a little while ago, and she was talking about how there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? So like your time is worth way more than like a potential client that might not even book with you. And so it's just those are things that can save time, and you really get to know who's really serious and wants to spend the time getting to know you, and yeah, maybe potentially book. But yeah, it's win-win both ways, I think, in
Yeah,
a
I
lot of it.
totally agree.
Yeah. So what would you say is more of like a semi-automated workflow with the inquiry process? Like what would be one way if someone's not ready to, let's say, like dive full in to like make it completely automated? What would you say would be like a semi way of doing that?
Yeah, so definitely use a CRM that has the option to require approval before sending. It may
Mm,
be worded in a different way. Again, I'm a
yeah.
HoneyBook user, and so that's the way that it is worded with HoneyBook. But what that does is it pulls up the templates that I've created, but it's not going to automatically send it. So I don't have to go digging through all my files. The email is
Yeah.
just waiting in a little notification bar, and I can open it. I can add in any details that I want to. So if a client has asked specific questions, I can answer it. Or if I'm sending a final gallery, for example, and I want to include some personal touch points of what happened on their wedding day or during their session, then I can do that. But all of the information about like, oh, sorry, my
You're
camera just
good.
decided to cut out. It did this to me the other day.
We lost your picture.
There we go. I have it plugged in, but it just like for some reason it doesn't like to work. Okay, so I was saying that
The
right,
semi-automation. Like,
semi-automated. So okay.
yes.
So when you have a notification, it's going to pull up that template and it is going to give you the opportunity to add in those extra notes. And then all of that general information that's going to be sent to every single client is already there. So you don't have to include what your response policy is, which I highly recommend everybody put into an autoresponder so that your clients aren't left wondering when they're going to hear back from you, which always, I think, leaves such a bad taste in my mouth when I'm on the client side. So letting clients know when they can expect to hear from you, what your policies are, what your turnaround times are like when payments are due, those kinds of things. That's general information that's going out to every single client. So you can have that in a template and then set that template to require approval before sending. So you can double check it, add any personal notes you want to, and then you're the one to physically click send. And so that's the best way to set up a semi-automated workflow, is just getting those templates up and running. And then if you can, put them into a workflow that's going to send you notifications rather than automatically sending out the emails for you. I personally like to use a mix of both. So for my inquiry process, when someone fills out my contact form, they do get an autoresponder with my pricing guide. I find for my clients anyway, people are really wanting that information first. When it comes to running a business, I'm all about doing things your way. So if you would rather send out a questionnaire or something like that, or book a consultation, then by all means, whatever works for you. But for me, my clients are looking for that pricing information first. So they get an autoresponder when they fill out my contact form. It includes my pricing guide. It includes information about when they can expect to hear back from me. And all of that info gets sent out automatically without me being at my computer. But then when it comes to the follow-up process, that's where I get a little bit more hands-on. And so my first follow-up is one where I really want to answer any questions they may have put into the contact form, address any concerns they may have, let them know if I'm available for their date and things like that. So that's important for me to be able to have my hands in it a little bit before I send it. So that is how I have my follow-up set up. And that way I'm able to just kind of mix and match and use it in a way that serves me and my clients for both of our needs.
I love that. Yeah, because for me, mine is very similar. I use Dubsado, so like I have, and shout out to Stephanie Ingram, who helped me set up all of my workflows, because I had so many different things I had to do, even for the podcast. Like I have workflows that help me with the booking process to help you do it on your own time, so you know. But one of the biggest thing is like when I have a potential lead, it'll like send me an automated email like, hey, check to see if you have this date available. If it's available, send this email. If it's not, send this one. Or I can mark it, like check the task, and then it moves on the workflow. Like, yep, I have this date available. It'll tell them. If not, it like sends them like the unfortunate email of I'm unavailable. Here are some recommendations, that kind of stuff. My question for you though, are you a transparent, like my prices are on my website, or are you a starting price person, or are you one that you wait till they contact you?
I am a starting at point person.
Okay.
So I have a starting at price, and then I also include an average price. So just letting people know on average, this is what my clients typically spend. So it's giving them an idea of kind of like a price range. Yeah. And then when they email me, they will get my full pricing guide with everything in it. And so they are able to get all of that information without having to like speak to me personally. So I don't require them to book a consultation or anything to get that information. But I do for the sake of just ease on my website and not just, overwhelming people with a million words that they're not going to read. I just put the starting at price on there.
Yeah. And I think a lot of honestly, that is the first thing everyone wants to know. They want to know if they can afford you. And if they can, they're like, yeah, I love this person, but I need to know, like, are they within my budget? And so when you say like, that is something, key to send them right away, like that is what they want.
Exactly.
Don't waste each other's time if like it's not going to work out. But I also think like being upfront with that keeps you from then having to say later like, oh, I guess I can make this work, and like make cuts because you're like, I'm not booking anybody, but I want to book them. Like it keeps you from doing that. I think for me, I do list my prices because I used to have, like right now I don't, but like all last year I had an influx of inquiries, and I'm like, I can't meet with every single one of these. I want to make sure we're a good fit. I wanted to eliminate the budget type of weddings that were not because I was finding more the ones that were at a lower budget were not valuing me and my time as much, and they weren't more of my ideal client. Now, when I'm very transparent, I'm starting to book more of my ideal clients and know like, oh, they're going to value this and this is what they want and stuff like that. But I mean, there's no right or wrong way to do it. I think if you are wanting more inquiries to see if you're attracting anybody, putting a starting point is great. And that's just my opinion. If you're getting a ton of inquiries and you're like, I don't have time to like weed through all of these and see if we're a good fit. I think sometimes you can alleviate that a little bit by just stating like, this is my pricing. Like, if you want it, let's talk. Like, you know? So I think, I don't know how you feel on that, but that's kind of like where I am with like the thought process on that. But
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I think that the argument is usually not to put your pricing on your website because you want the opportunity to sell to people.
mm-hmm.
And I totally get that, but I know when I was planning my wedding and trying to like come up with a budget and things like that, there was nothing more frustrating to me than when I said that I wanted something and people went through the effort to try and make it happen only to be told that it couldn't happen for whatever reason. So like they knew my budget and then they came at me with something that was way outside my budget, but like disrespectfully outside my budget. Or going to look at bridesmaids dresses and I knew exactly what dress I wanted and exactly the color I wanted. And after going around the store for a half an hour, then the salesperson says to me, oh, you can't actually get it in that color. And so like things like that, I think really ruin the planning process. It really sours the experience and relationship that you're building with your clients. And so giving them at least a starting point to qualify their budget is, I think, just like a sign of respect, not only for your time, but for their time. And I just think that there is room for upselling, absolutely, but just in a respective way and not a respectful way and not, you know, seeing that someone has a budget of $1,500 for wedding photography and coming at them with an $8,000 package. Like there's room for upselling. And then there's just, you have to accept the truth that not everybody is in every budget and it's not as simple as if they value it, they'll find the money. I wish that life was like that, but it doesn't work like that. So, I think that I respect the conversation about the room for selling, but I think that there's a way to still upsell your clients without being disrespectful of their time and their budget and their priorities for their wedding.
Well, and I think too, like when people are getting ghosted all the time, a lot of times it's because they're not transparent about their pricing and then they're like, nope, this doesn't work. And a lot of times it's those individuals, which honestly, like if there is that process of like where they have to do such and such thing, because I know there's like, we're really getting on a tangent here, but I think there's a lot that like, it's like, do you have this couple answer this many questions? It's like if you're getting an overload influx of people inquiring and you're finding a lot of them are not your ideal client, bump up that inquiry form and ask more questions.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
The ones that really want to book with you, they're going to take the time to do that. Where those who are like, I just want your prices, you know, like you're going to weed those people out. And those are the ones that are going to ghost you anyway and not respond. I don't know. Do you feel the same way? Like, have you seen that?
Yeah, absolutely. I used to send out a questionnaire before my pricing guide and it was great at first. I absolutely loved it. And then it got to a point where I just found that people weren't interested in filling it out. They really wanted the pricing. And so I think that it's important for business owners to give themselves the opportunity to switch things up and test things out. And if this isn't working as well as it used to, maybe try something else and just see what your clients respond to. But you're totally right. Like there are characteristics that are very common towards people who are just price shopping and people who are actually interested in working with you. And it takes a little bit of time to kind of, figure out which is which. But when you're really paying attention to the inquiries that are coming into your inbox, it definitely makes it easier to navigate as you go along.
Yeah, it's definitely something you learn over time because honestly, like whatever worked for me last year might not work for me this year. And so
Exactly.
sometimes when I'm like, there's really like, I'm very big into like comparing each year and like the amount of what I booked in certain time periods. Cause when it, when we're talking about weddings, like there's obviously periods of time where that is an influx.
Hmm.
But even like family sessions, newborns, like anything like that, you can kind of see the projection from each year. And so if you're looking at it and saying, I booked a lot in this time period but nothing's happening, that's when you really have to like self-evaluate and be like, what did I change, what should I do differently, based on that, and kind of make small adjustments and just try it out, kind of see from there. But is there anything you would say that someone should absolutely include in their inquiry workflow, or have we covered that? I just want to make sure like we didn't miss anything.
No, we didn't miss anything. I think I would just emphasize the importance of including information about when you're typically in your inbox or in your office and how long it typically
Mm,
takes you to respond to an email. And that way
yes,
you
that's good.
don't have someone sending you an email on Friday, around 6 p.m., and then sending you another email Saturday at 10 a.m., and then another email Monday at 4 p.m. because they still haven't heard from me. When realistically, in
Yeah.
office hours, like if you emailed me at 6 p.m. on Friday and I respond to you at 9:15 on Monday, for me, it only took me 15 minutes to respond to you. For them, it may have been
Hmm.
4 days, 3 days, but I have that information in my autoresponder so they know that after 6 o'clock on Friday until Monday, I'm not in my office. So you are not going to hear back from me. And so that eliminates the possibility of having people email me every single day because I haven't responded fast enough.
Yeah.
And that is something that used to really stress me out earlier on in my business when I
Mm,
didn't have those sort of boundaries. And I remember like
yep.
going to get my hair
Same.
cut and posting about it online and then having one of my clients email me asking about her photos. And so all of those things can be eliminated when you're really making effort to have clear communication with your clients,
Yeah.
making sure they know that what your boundaries are. And so one way that you can do that right from the very beginning is just by letting them know when you're going to be in your inbox. They need to know that
Hmm.
you have a life outside of your computer and outside of working with
Yeah,
them.
for sure. I totally agree. Um, and is there anything like you include in that first email other than your pricing? I know. So just shout out, like before we end this, today there is going to be a freebie that she has for listeners, so we'll get to that. If you keep listening, you'll hear more about that. But is there anything you include in the inquiry form that's more than just pricing, more than just hours? Like i I have some things I do, but I want to hear from you first, like what you include in there.
Yeah, of course. So my pricing guide is built in HoneyBook. And so this is actually, I think it's like 8 or 9 pages. So it's not
Oh,
just my
dang.
pricing information. It's like a whole little welcome brochure that tells
Hmm.
them about my business, a little bit about me. I have a link to a video in there so they can see a slideshow and learn a little bit more about my business. I include like what my mission statement is, what they can expect during their client journey. And so they're getting questions to or answers to questions that they haven't even thought about asking at that point. And I think
Hmm.
that the more information that you can give right away without overwhelming them too much is really important. Again, we're in this era where everybody wants to be able to have things instantly. I'm totally a product of that by wanting to book my hair appointment online at night. And
Yeah.
so I try to give as much information as possible without overwhelming. And so I know that they're
Hmm.
still going to have questions. And that's totally fine. Like, I don't want to give them a 500-page guide that's going to answer every possible question they could have
Yeah.
because I still do want to have the opportunity to have a
Hmm.
conversation with them at the consultation or whatever that may be. But at least giving them the information of like, can I afford this? Is this the style that I'm
Yeah.
looking for? Are the photos going to be ready in time? Like, those are questions that are circling
Yeah.
people's minds in the booking process that I don't really necessarily have to be the one to personally answer myself. And so I like to include that kind of information in there. I also have a background of doing wedding shows a lot. I don't do them anymore,
Mm.
but I used to when I was first starting out in the wedding industry. And I remember my very first show, I didn't have a logo on my booth. I like thought of everything except for any sort of signage to let people know what I was actually doing. So I had a lot of people come up and ask me if I was a photographer. But I also was kind of like sales pitching every single person who came in. And this was with no sales pitch experience whatsoever. So it'd be like someone came into my booth and I'd ask them what their wedding date was. And if I was available, it was like, here's my packages. Let me tell you about all of my packages. Here's my policy. Here's how I do things. And I could see like the light check out of their eyes partway through the conversation. And they're just standing there trying to be polite. Like, okay, I don't need to know all of this right now, but I don't want to really leave this conversation. And so I think that really taught me a lot when it came to putting together a pricing guide and email templates and things like that, was just kind of finding that balance of the information they need to have right now and the information that I can save to help them out later when they ask questions. Because there's nothing better for clients when they're asking you questions is when you're ready to go with that answer.
It's funny you say you can see the light in their face when they've checked out, because I totally know what you mean when I was doing a bridal show and I'm like, okay, do I keep talking? Are they going to notice if I stop?
Right?
Like, okay. But yeah, so for me in my inquiry form, like the first one says like, I'm checking your date. And then I also provide 1 or 2 full galleries so they can know what a full gallery looks like. Cause I think a lot of times they're like, okay, here's her prices, but what would we get with that? And I think sometimes as a visual, like to know and see, like this is like an entire from beginning to end day of what you would get and how much I shoot. This is my style, all that kind of stuff. I feel like it just gives them more of a hands-on. Like I obviously have that stuff on my website where they can look, but a lot of times, if they've been like following you for a long time or know you word of mouth, they're just like, yeah, I want to check with her and see if she's available. They're not going to like, they're super excited, or they're checking multiple photographers at once. It's like, what's going to make you stand out with all the inquiries they're sending out? So like trying to make sure that you include something personal in there in a way that like they can connect with, is like personally feel like that's something. Cause even when I send that and then they get like the email, like, hey, I have your date available. Let's set up a time to like do a consult or something like that. Even so, like I'll ask them in that consult, like, are you meeting with a lot of other photographers? What do you remember? If you don't remember, let's go through this detail by detail. Usually by the time they've booked a consult with me, they're like set. They just want to meet me before they like throw the cash down, you know?
Yeah.
So that's a lot of kind of what I go through so that they can remember what they looked at, who they talked with, that kind of thing. But
I always love talking to other photographers about what their process looks like, because I do really believe that there's no one right way to do things.
No.
Every business is unique. Every business owner is unique. All these clients are unique. We are not all working with the exact same people. And so I send full galleries as well, but I send it in my first follow-up because that's the first like personal touch point I have, because I am sending that pricing guide up front. And so, yeah, I just think it's so interesting to hear just the different ways that people do things. Because I know when I first started trying to implement systems and workflows into my business, it was like there was a lot of education that was like, this is how you have to do it. And I would try that. And with, I have chronic illnesses. I'm a stepmom. I have ADHD. And so what works for a neurotypical person who doesn't have kids, who's 20 years old, who doesn't have a chronic illness, what works for them is not going to work for me. It doesn't matter how hard I try. I'm setting myself up for failure. And so, yeah, I just think it's really, really important for photographers, business owners to just take an honest look at what their needs are, not necessarily worry about what everybody else is doing, because our photographers are our peers. They're not our clients. And so realistically, they, as politely and with as much love as possible, they don't matter.
Yes, exactly. No, I totally get it. I mean, unless that person wants you to do their wedding. I totally agree on that. So what are some programs maybe that you use other than HoneyBook to automate your workflows? Like, what are some of those for you?
Yeah, so I use HoneyBook, Asana, and Flowdesk are like my
Mm,
3 primary systems that I'm using, or
okay.
system services that I'm using. So
Yes.
HoneyBook I use for all things client-facing, like contracts and invoices, session reminders, any helpful PDFs that I have that I send out, for, like, inspiration for their engagement session and timing of
Mm,
the wedding day and things like that. All of that is going through HoneyBook. And then for the back end of things like reminding myself when photos are due and, kind of just like making sure I'm guiding people through the process where I want them to be and things like that. All of that I do in Asana. And that's where I also have my like weekly to do lists and things like that.
mm,
Asana has a lot of great features where you can set up what they call rules, where it's going to
mm,
be like if you have something set for this date, it'll automatically move it into another section and things like that. I've actually just started playing around with Zapier as well, which
mm.
I guess connects
Yeah.
HoneyBook and for me connects HoneyBook and Flowdesk, which I think is
Yeah.
really nice. I was really hesitant to get on board with Zapier for a long time because I thought it was going to be really complicated and really
Yeah. It's
expensive.
really easy.
Yeah, so easy. And so now, like when I have someone book a session inside HoneyBook, it's automatically creating a gallery for them inside my PickTime account, and it's automatically adding them to my Flowdesk, which is what I use for email marketing.
I love
And I
that.
have all kinds of workflows set up in there as well. So people are always feeling right at home and supported through their entire client experience from start to finish without me ever having to. I shouldn't say without me ever having to. It's semi automated. So I still have to be there. I still have to be a part of it. And then you were talking about Imagen earlier as well. I absolutely love Imagen. I don't know how I got this far in my career without having
Right?
AI editing. And it's like, if I
Oh,
could go back and do it all with AI editing
yes.
and the knowledge I have now, like, watch out, everybody. I'm going to be the
Right?
queen of this industry. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. But yeah,
Yeah.
AI editing and culling and everything has just been a total game changer.
I love that you brought up Zapier because that is one I use even for potential clients because I have galleries available on my website and they do like have to log in to like their email. So I have it set up where if it's a specific titled gallery, let's say it says weddings or it says seniors, like Zapier will see that word in that gallery in that email and it'll send them into a workflow in Zap or in Flowdesk. So like I have one set up for my seniors that like walks them through tips or like, hey, are you still interested? Like it just keeps me in their inbox so they don't forget about me. And the same for weddings. I have that as well because a lot of times like they just check things out now, but they're not ready to book until later. I had that when I did a bridal show as well, like 6 months later. I'm like, so um yeah, like, so we met at the bridal show. They're like, yeah, but I completely forgot about it till I got this email like 6 months later. I'm like,
Right?
oh, so I'm like, yeah, I'm like, that just encouraged me more. Like, okay, like, and I'm not sitting there like spamming them. I do like a workflow. And then in Flowdesk, they have options like if they don't click, they don't open, like you can like take them off the list or like dump
Hmm.
them into another one just so you're not like continually emailing that person and them frustrated. So yeah, those are kind of some of the automations I do as well. I also have one for each wedding gallery. So guests from a wedding, if they go in there, it sends them into another one that talks about like, hey, use this coupon to buy prints between this date and this date.
Oh, that's
And then it runs
awesome.
out, like stuff like that. Um, yeah, just keeps me in their like radar, you know?
Yeah,
So that's kind of
absolutely.
some of my automations that sometimes I forget about or even there. And then they like reply to one of those emails and I'm like, what are they talking about? And then I'm like, oh, like look at the email below. Like, oh, they're talking about an automated email I set up 3 years ago that I don't remember.
Right? It's so true.
So it's just kind of funny. But um, before we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to talk about the freebie that you want to offer to people that are listening today. So go ahead and talk about that and what
Yeah, of
that is.
course. So this freebie is essentially my wedding workflow. So if you are a wedding photographer and you are wanting to spruce up your workflow, or if you've never created a workflow before and you want to get started, this will tell you exactly what my workflow looks like step by step from the inquiry process right through until I'm wrapping things up with the client. Recommendations on like what I send at each increment, what timing I recommend. So it makes it really easy for you to just go in. All you have to do is add your own templates and then it's ready to go. I also have a video that's included that will help you navigate through, like walk through the process. It is again built in HoneyBook because I am a HoneyBook user, but with this wedding workflow being a PDF version, the basics of how to set it up are pretty much the same. There may be a little,
Yeah.
difference here and there depending on what platform you're using. But I made it in such a way that it is not, specifically for HoneyBook users. So if you are using
Yes.
Dubsado or any other platform, then you can definitely apply this as well. And it will just help you get organized as you head into busy season this year.
Yeah, I like it because it had like little check boxes that can say like, "Hey, this is something to have in your inquiry process like
Mm-hmm.
here." And then here's like the offboarding process of delivery and stuff like that. That was really good. I love that. And then for all those visual people who are like not tech savvy, then you can have that little extra in there. That's good. Well, where can we find you on the web if everyone's like, yeah, I want to go follow her. I love this episode. Where are you found? I know there's a lot of different places. So kind of tell
Yeah.
us all of the things.
Of course. So you can find me on social media platforms. So on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads, you'll find me at Simply Sandra Yvonne. For Facebook, it's Simply Sandra Y because they were just wanting to keep me on my toes with that. And then I also have a podcast, which is called Keeping It Candid. And I talk all about systems and how it relates to wedding and photography businesses, and just sharing ways that you can simplify and streamline things behind the scenes.
Yeah, so the fun doesn't have to end here. You can go and listen to her podcast as well. If you're loving this episode, please leave a review. I would love to hear what you loved from this episode with Sandra and just kind of tell us what little nuggets you took away today, so others can know that they need to check out this episode as well. If you want to follow the podcast and hear more, you can find us at karahainesphotography.com/podcast, or you can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Cameras and Coffee Podcast. But yeah, that just kind of wraps everything up. Sandra, thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait for everyone to hear this episode. So good. So many great things. So thank you for coming on today.
Of course. Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
Yes. And then, friends, until next time, I just want to say cheers.